Ready to go again. Ready?
Well, we are going to do one more lesson in this series. Obviously, we could do a lot of individuals on this idea of faith and their impact. We did Mary last week. We're going to do the Apostle Peter this week, and then we're going to be changing up our Bible study. I do like to kind of rotate the type of studies we do, and we're going to go back into a book study next. So if you have a suggestion, I have one in mind, but if someone has a particular book they want us to study, I'm always up for suggestions as well. But we'll get into that starting next week. Actually, I'll take that back. I was going to talk about to you guys about possibly what you all would think about doing a prayer meeting next week and kind of doing some prep work for that. But we can talk about that a little bit more maybe after service tonight. But tonight we're going to talk about the Apostle Peter. We're still building from the same premise that we have been talking about. He doesn't appear in the book of Hebrews, obviously, because it's talking about Old Testament figures, but his life is certainly an example for us. We're going to talk about a couple instances in his life that help us to understand not just what he did or what he said, but the impact of the faith that he was seeking and the faith that he was living, and of course, not only on himself, but on those around him, including us today. Hebrews 11, verse 1 is one of these verses we've been using quite a bit. Now, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. And what I hope that we've said throughout this is that these people are people of faith. They're not always people of blind faith. And what I mean by that is every time they've been asked to do something that they can't see the end of, but they've always been given proof of God, if that would be fair to say. You think of Gideon and his kind of going back and forth with the wool, but the whole time he was talking to God. Moses, he was talking to God in the burning bush. When we talk about these individuals, we talk about a past understanding that allows them to trust things that they don't see in front of them. And that's what we mean by the evidence of things not seen, the substance of things hoped for. And of course, we're going to see that again tonight with the Apostle Peter. We see almost two different people in Peter. The first person we meet, the fisherman, what kind of man was he? How would you describe him? He's outspoken? He definitely was outspoken. Yeah, okay. Yeah, he seemed to be a very driven individual. Anything else? Any other descriptions come to your mind?
Very passionate in what he believed in. Like, right or wrong.
Okay.
He was very passionate about it.
Okay. He was kind of an all-in kind of guy, wasn't he? Even if it was the wrong thing. That's certainly true. He seems like he was a man that was a strong person. I mean, physically strong. There's one occasion that it says he pulled that net with those great fish by himself. So he was probably someone who was used to what? Working hard, whatever needed to be done, doing it, right? He's somebody that we see a lot of similarities to in us as far as probably our personality. Sometimes we speak before we should. He kind of had a tendency to do that a couple times, right? In which he was called Satan and rebuked by Jesus. But he was a fisherman, and he's going to be called to become a fisher of men. That's in Luke 5. He was impulsive. He was passionate. Go ahead.
A sword and cut a man's ear off.
Yeah.
Or hurt his ear.
Yeah, he was definitely a man. In most ways, he was a man probably of strength and value and trying to be honorable. When we talk about him denying Jesus 3 times, We won't have as much time to develop that tonight because we're looking at a bigger, broader stroke of his life. But I just want to remind us that the reason why I think he fell is because his world was broken. And it wasn't so much so as that, he was personally not able to be strong, but he didn't understand what was happening so much it broke what he thought he was giving himself to. And when that happens, you don't know where you stand. And of course, that's what comes in there. We'll talk about that briefly, but that deserves a bigger picture. What about after he's walked with Jesus on the other side of Pentecost as what we know the Apostle Peter? Does he seem to have changed? In what ways does he seem to have changed? Or maybe you don't think he changed and he's the same person.
He stood up in front of a lot of people, the same people that participated in the crucifixion of Jesus, and told them exactly what they had done.
Okay. We've talked about that term meek before. What does the word meek mean?
Strength under control.
Strength under control, right? So all that strength, all that kind of almost stubbornness and so forth that he had to begin with, now is refocused in a different way. And you see that happen. We can talk about this with Saul too, but since we're talking about Peter, it's under more control. He's not as impulsive. He's learned to walk in a different way. And of course, he walked with Jesus for 3 years, and then he was inspired by the Spirit. So this is no small task, and he wasn't perfect in it. Remember, Paul says that he had to call Peter out because he kind of fell into showing favoritism there in Antioch with the Jewish Christians, those who were Jews by birth and so forth, over the Gentile Christians. So, he was definitely more under control, though, on the other side of that. So we talked about our series theme of faith, and we've talked about the idea of verse 6, which we've kind of adapted as our year theme here, that we're going to diligently seek him. So we have to not only believe, but those who diligently seek him, he will reward. But let's consider what that looks like as we look at Peter's life. Again, there's so much in his life for us to look at. We can't look at everything, but we can look at a couple things. Would you start with me in the book of Matthew, chapter 14. Matthew 14. You have, of course, this is also recorded in John 6, but you have the feeding of the 5,000. It starts in about verse 13. And then that night, Jesus is going to cross, they're going to cross over the water, and Jesus is going to walk on the water. One of the most famous scenes here with the Apostle Peter and Jesus. So let's go ahead and refresh ourselves on what actually happens here and what is said here so we can use it for our thoughts tonight. Look at verse 22, Matthew 14. Immediately Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side, while he sent the multitudes away. And when he had sent the multitudes away, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. Now when evening came, he was alone there. So he's already sent them on in the boat, and he's gone back up on the mountain to pray by himself. Verse 24. But the boat was now in the middle of the sea, tossed by the waves, for the wind was contrary. And now in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went to them, walking on the sea. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, "It's a ghost." And they cried out for fear. I don't understand why they would have assumed a ghost. And every time I hear this or read this, I hear Joey's voice say it's a ghost. If you watch Friends, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't, you're better off. All right. But here is these disciples. They're on a ship or a boat in the middle of the sea at night, being tossed to and fro, and they see this figure on the water. What would your mind think it was? I mean, I don't know if they knew any better. I don't know that they've seen a ghost. That's not what, but they had nothing else to apply to it. So that's what they say, it's a ghost, it's a spirit, it's something like that. Going back to the verse 26, and they cried out for fear. So what's the state of mind of these men?
Scared.
They're scared. I mean, their world's being rocked by the waves, and now there's this figure out walking on the waves that, so they're afraid. They cried out in fear. Verse 27. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Be of good cheer. It is I. Do not be afraid." And Peter answered him and said, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." So he said, "Come." And when Peter had come down out of the boat, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. But when he saw that the wind was boisterous, he was afraid. And beginning to sink, he cried out, saying, "Lord, save me." And immediately Jesus stretched out his hand, caught him, and said to him, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased. And then those who were in the boat came and worshipped him, saying, "Truly you are the Son of God." This statement is one of my favorite statements. And we're going to talk about what everybody else talks about in this story here in just a moment, about his willingness to step out of the boat and all that. But before we do, this is next level faith right here. And I don't even know if Peter knows it. Look at this statement. This is what Peter says to Jesus. What stands out to you in this verse? Anything particular?
If it's you, it stands out to me.
If it's you, okay? Yeah, if it's not you, don't bother. I don't know. I'm not going to take a chance on it, okay? Anything else?
All you have to do is command, and I can do this.
What's so unique about that statement?
No one else could do that.
Yeah, it's not that Peter believed he could do it if he believed hard enough. But he said, if you command me, what? Then I can do it. What's he accepting in that? Yeah. This is that next level of faith that is really hard to kind of put into a way sometimes for us to use. Because, again, we want to know. We'll proclaim, yes, our faith allows us to do things when we can't see and trust and so, but we really want to know what the next step is going to be and what the end is going to be. And in order to launch out of that boat, he has to believe in something. He's not believing in his power to be magical and walk on the water. What is he believing in? In Jesus himself, right? If you command me, then I can do it. He didn't say if I believed hard enough. And we're going to flip that because Jesus is going to call out his lack of faith here in a second. But it's really important. When God commands us to do something, even if it seems like it's impossible, if we'll understand that if God commands you to do something, he's going to supply you with what you need to fulfill it. So think about the things God has asked us to do that seem to be hard. What might come to mind? What's God asked you to do that might seem hard or even impossible?
Well, when we let the world enter into that thought, there's a whole lot of things.
Okay, just give me
We give up. We may give up friends. We may give up family.
Okay.
We may give up a part of our life that seems great.
Okay, so let's take a couple of those. We may feel God has called us to this, and if God has called us to this and we answer that, it's going to cost us someone, a family member. And some of you all may have walked these paths. I have. I know what that feels like. But the reality is, most of the time, that's veiled threats and so forth. That usually doesn't last very long. But even if it does, it seems like, I can't do that. I can't. If God commands you to do it, what's he going to provide? What you need to be able to fulfill it. The inner strength, whatever it is. Okay? So, and maybe Jimmy also said something in our life that we don't feel like we can give up. You probably haven't had to face this, but imagine being in that first century and being confronted constantly with the Word of God and being a man like Philemon, which gets upset about that runaway slave named Onesimus. And then when Paul writes to him and he's pouring out, do you think the only slave in Philemon's mind after he reads that is Onesimus? There's a statement that's made in 1 Timothy chapter 1, verse 10. If you read the ESV, the New King James does not say that, but it lists those who basically won't see the kingdom of God, and it mentions enslavers. And I know Scripture is one of those hot button things when it comes to slavery, because Paul didn't go around saying, give up your slaves if you want to be faithful to God. But it was when you understand who God is and who Jesus is, and then you look, what's going to have to be a choice that you're going to have to make.
Give up your slaves.
Remember what he said? This is your brother. So it is the cost of doing things, and it may seem impossible. Well, I won't be able to, keep up with my farms. I'll be ostracized by the locals. Maybe I'll take pressure from authorities because I'm setting a bad example and causing an uprising. There's all kinds of things that might seem impossible to us, but if we walk with what God commanded us, not what we necessarily want to do, then I believe God will provide what we need to do it. So he says, command me and I can walk in the water. Come is what Jesus says. And when Peter had come down out of the boat, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. How far did he get?
It don't seem like very far.
Yeah, I don't know how far, but it had to have been a little ways to have walked, right? I mean, we all watch our kids when they take their first steps. We don't, when they're standing there, we're not saying they walked. They have to take a step or two, right? So we know he did at least that. And we know he didn't make it to Jesus. However far away Jesus was, he didn't make it that far because something happens. So let's talk about this whole boldness of belief and faith, this initiative of faith, this first part. Him willing to step out of the boat and be willing to take that leap, if you would. Faith often requires us to leave, and this is kind of trite, and I understand that, but our comfort. Right? There's comfort in the majority, there's comfort in the common, there's comfort in what everybody else is doing. Even if we know it's not good, helpful, or it's even harmful. Because being uncomfortable sometimes is worse to us than doing, I hate to say this, but doing things we know are not beneficial to us. And you think, well, that sounds like something we were all taught when we were growing up, right? Peer pressure. Why would, and this is always framed towards teenagers, but the truth is it happens long before teenagers and it happens long after. Why would a teenager engage in an activity they knew is bad for them and harmful for them? Because
everybody else is doing it.
Yeah, and being uncomfortable with having to be the person outside is more of a negative than what might happen. Now think about that. Most teenagers know. They've been taught, they've heard that. Why do they do it? Why? And I'm not calling any of us out, but we've made our own mistakes in life, and more than likely, it's not out of complete ignorance. We knew better. So why do we do it? That idea of being comfortable. This is what everybody else does. This is the moment. We don't like to be uncomfortable. But being or taking this initiative of faith, stepping out, I mean, the people who are in the boat, the waves are still, remember, it doesn't calm down until after the scene. So the waves are still crashing and still, which makes this whole idea of walking on the water even crazier. And you think, well, what's the comfort in the boat? They're in the boat together. It may go down, but at least in the moment, that seems more comfortable than being out on the sea. But being on the sea would be with being with Jesus. You see how they haven't walked that path. They don't know it yet. We can also make this point, I think, from this. There's this distraction that occurs, right? What does the text tell us that happens to Peter as he starts to walk?
He kind of hears what's going on as far as the weather.
Here's the weather report.
Yeah, the waves, I mean, good grief.
Yeah. Have you ever been by the water when, especially the sea, when the waves are pretty good and you get that sea mist that kind of sprays you? You ever had that experience, been on a dock or even a shoreline and those waves crash and kind of throws water in your face? Can you imagine these waves crashing all around them? They can't see very well. That wind's blowing, that water's crashing and hitting them in the face. The boat's going up and down. And yet, at first, he didn't pay attention to that. What did he pay attention to?
Jesus.
Jesus. But as he began to walk, he feels that spray, he hears that howl of that wind, he feels those waves, whatever it is, man, the combination of all that. And he takes his eyes, as we might say, off Jesus and starts to pay attention to those things. What happens?
He sings.
He doubts and he begins to sink, right? I don't know what's in your mind's eye in that story, that picture. I've always struggled with this. Did he just like in the water, you did just plop in, or did he slowly sink like quicksand? I don't know, because it says he began to sink. And so I really struggle with that. And my brain has two different versions of that. You have the standard version and the extended cut, right? I mean, I've got him just plopping down and him slowly going. I don't know. Either way, he starts to sink. So much so that he knows what?
He's in trouble.
He's in trouble. And he cries out for Jesus to save him. All right. And then, of course, on Jesus' part, we call it the reach of mercy here as he reaches out. I do want to point this out on Jesus' part, because I think this is really important for us to see. He rebukes Peter, right? What does he say?
Ye of little faith.
Ye of little faith. We'll come back to what that really means. I just want you to see that he does rebuke him. But as he does, what else is he doing?
Saving.
He's saving him. What does that tell us, if anything?
We may take our mind off of Jesus, but Jesus never takes his mind off of us.
Okay, I like that. That's true. Just because we stumble doesn't mean God gives up on us, right? So here's Peter stumbling, and we say, well, at least he stepped out of the boat. I've heard that I don't know how many times. Yes, that's fine. But then he stumbles. But Jesus, though he's going to rebuke him, he does reach down and grabs him and saves him. And sometimes we're going to find ourselves in those moments where our faith is failing, and we could be that person in that moment. He's just talking about the moment. He's not talking about Peter's overall faith. Okay? But in that moment, we might be that person of little faith. Does God run away? Or reach down? Right? So we're seeing this boldness of what he does and what he is engaged in, and we see, of course, the mercy of Jesus in this. Before we get to the second story about him, what does this story ultimately teach you? What do you walk away when you think of this story? You've probably even taught it, no doubt if you've taught a class, you've taught this story to kids, or you taught it in an adult class. What's your takeaway with Peter walking on the water?
We do the same thing. We take our eyes off of Jesus.
Okay. That's when we feel like we sink, right?
He had the faith to cry out, Lord, save me, before he got too far gone. He wasn't just expecting Jesus to save him or for him to walk away. He knew that he had to do something to get that help. Like, he was proactive in that.
Okay.
And that's something that I've never really looked at until now. But he was proactive. He said, Lord, save me. And then Jesus rebukes him and is saving him.
Okay. He's proactive. I like that. I want you to pay attention to something as we look at these three stories. We're going to talk about him being rebuked here in a second. And then we're going to talk about, kind of combine it, his denying Jesus 3 times, and then that scene in John chapter 21, which I've actually referenced a couple times here lately, in this story. And I'm going to come back to this. I'm going to kind of just give you enough to maybe hint at it and see if you pick up on it. But there's something different about Peter. He was the one that stepped out on faith. He also makes a very public failure. But he's also the one that they watch and listen to and follow.
And the others did.
All right, so we're going to come back to that here in a second. Let's talk about this statement that Jesus makes to him. It's pretty powerful. It's pretty strong. We're actually going to go to Luke this time. If you want to turn over to Luke chapter 22. Luke chapter 22. And if we're looking down in the 30s here, we're going to be in 31. Just before this, you had the upper room. You had them taking the Lord's Supper, the commissioning of it. Then you had this argument about who's great and what greatness is. And it's really important to keep that in mind, that whole discussion occurs beforehand. But then we drop down to verse 31. And it says, "And the Lord said, Simon, Simon, indeed, Satan has asked for you that he may sift you as wheat. But I have prayed for you that your faith should not fail. And when you have returned to me, strengthen your brethren." But he said to him, "Lord, I am ready to go with you both to prison and to death." And then he said, "I tell you, Peter, the rooster shall not crow this day before you will deny 3 times that you know me." I want you to go back and look at this statement. He says, "I have prayed for you." It hasn't happened yet. And what has Jesus done? He's already prayed, specifically for Peter. And now watch what he says in that your faith should not fail. Now Jesus prays that his faith shall not fail. And watch the next statement. "And when you have returned to me." There's 2 ways to take this. One is that it's going to fail. He knows it's going to fail. He doesn't want it to fail, but he knows it's going to fail. I'm okay with that. I'm perfectly fine. I can't argue that that's not right. I believe there's plenty to argue. The second way to take that is he didn't fail in the same way we think he did. We have the boat scene again. In those, he denies him 3 times and he seems like he's gone. Jesus doesn't give up on him. He reaches down. So either way, we still know that Jesus knows what's going to take place. And he's got Peter in mind as he prays, right? And he says, "When you have returned to me," that second part, strengthen your... How many times do we think that God can't use us, or won't use us, or people won't listen, or people won't follow us, because they know I messed up 20 years ago and did this? We're not talking about 20 years ago. We're talking about things that are going to be what? Yeah, just days in occurrence and dramatic things. And I'm going to ask here again in a second, why do you think they would follow? Why would they listen? We'll come back to that. I'm just going to put that out there. So you have this warning to Peter that he is going to fall. He's going to deny him 3 times. And we don't have time to read all the text for this, so I'm trusting that you are pretty familiar with this story. It's recorded by Matthew, it's recorded by Mark, it's recorded by Luke. And when he denies him, we're just going to stay in Luke real quick. If you're still in 22, jump over to verse 54. It says, "Having arrested him, they led him and brought him into the high priest's house, but Peter followed at a distance. Now when they had kindled a fire in the midst of the courtyard and sat down, Peter sat among them, and a certain servant girl, seeing him as he sat by the fire, looked intently at him and said, 'This man was also with him.' But he denied him, saying, 'Woman, I do not know him.' And after a little while, another saw him and said, 'You also are of them.' But Peter said, 'Man, I am not.' Then after about an hour had passed, another confidently affirmed, saying, 'Surely this fellow also is with him, for he is a Galilean.' But Peter said, 'Man, I do not know what you are saying.' Immediately while he was still speaking, the rooster crowed. And look at verse 61. You want to talk about a dagger. And the Lord turned and looked at Peter. And he is arrested. He is in a crowd. They are mocking him. Let's go to the next part. They're going to start smacking him and punching him in the face, spitting at him. And he turns and looks right at Peter. Now, I have this whole thing in my mind's eye, too. If you know the surroundings and what that historical city would have been like, they had brought him in front of the high priest's house, which is right down below where the temple was. It's a marketplace in front. It's a hot, arid place, so not all the buildings, especially in the marketplace, are solid walls. A lot of them are these curtains, these materials, so the wind can blow through, so you have a thing. And I don't know, this is just me, but I just imagine that he's standing there by that, and those curtains just move just enough that he sees him. I don't know, maybe it's just a straight shot. But he cuts over and he looks right at Peter. And I don't know if you've ever had one of these moments in your life where you just messed up so bad, whether you were a kid, it was a parent, or whatever, and you know that the height of disappointment you just had with someone, you feel it. That's Peter. Broken. Right? So let's put a couple things in front of us as we think about that. He denied him 3 times by this charcoal fire. His faith seems shattered by his own cowardice. I mean, he's this strong figure that we've seen all this time. But maybe we'll have a study on this at some point where we can talk about this a little bit deeper. Why I think his world was broken. Once your world's broken, you don't know where you stand. It's really easy to find our faith just kind of broken with it. John chapter 21. Can we turn over there real quick? We've got about 4 minutes. We have to go over a minute. Just alluded to this the other day. I want you to look at the very first part of this, and then we're going to drop down a little bit. We don't have time to read it all, so we're going to have to paraphrase a little bit of it. But verse 1 in chapter 21 says, After these things, Jesus showed himself again to the disciples in the Sea of Tiberias, which is the Sea of Galilee, by the way. And in this way, he showed himself. Simon Peter, Thomas called the twin, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, 2 others of his disciples were together. So he showed himself again. So Peter's seen him at least a couple times at this point since his resurrection. Verse 3. Simon Peter said to them, I'm going fishing. And they said to him, we're going with you also. They went out and immediately got into the boat, and that night they caught nothing. I want to go back to this verse right here. He said, and when you have returned to me, strengthen your brethren. What did Jesus know about Peter?
He was going to fail.
Okay, we talked about that. But the last part, why did he charge him to strengthen his brethren? What do you know about him?
He knew
His
he was
personality.
coming.
He needed Peter.
Okay?
He needed his type of person.
Okay.
He would be a leader.
Yeah, he was a natural leader.
They followed him regardless.
Yeah. He didn't have a higher rank. He's not a pope and they're below him. He's a natural leader. What makes someone a natural leader?
They do.
They do. Exactly. He's the one who steps out of the boat. He's the one that speaks up even if he gets, smacked down. He's the one that gets up. He's the one that pulls the sword out. He's the one who does. What does his faith then in return produce? Faith in others. Right? He's a natural leader. If we go back to this right here, and I'm just burning time here, but we have the whole scene. They go out fishing, they catch nothing all night. This figure's on the shore. It says, cast your nets on the other side, which they've heard before. They do so. They bring in this big load of fish. Peter knows right away. That's Jesus. Doesn't even wait to bring the boats in. Puts on his outer garment, specifically tells us that, and swims, which makes it harder, and jumps in the water and swims ashore. Again, what do we see in Peter? Someone who does. Okay? And when he gets to shore, then we have this meal, and then Jesus asks him 3 times, do you love me? And he's going to tell him, feed my sheep and tend my sheep, which is exactly what he had said before. when you return to me, strengthen your brethren. Now, we've expired time, but here's really what I want to do with, right here. Faith is more than simply doing the right thing versus doing the wrong thing. Faith is a relationship. It's built between Jesus and Peter. It's a relationship that's not perfect on our end. It never will be. But what made Peter, his faith, stick out?
He was willing to do, when he made a mistake, he was willing to do right.
Yeah. He was willing to do. Even when he made a mistake, he had to take the consequences of it. But he got up and he did again. He wasn't waiting. I know that we need to wait on the Lord, and we shall be lifted up on eagle's wings. I understand that's an Isaiah text in which they are in judgment. In the text, it was pronounced of, but the time of writing was that they would be in the spot and they'd have to wait on Jesus or on God. There would be no choice. And there are times that we need to wait. But faith in all these examples aren't people sitting on the sidelines, are they? What are they doing? Whatever they've been asked to do. That's really the lesson for us ultimately. We need to do the things we've been asked to do. If they're small things, if they're big things, if they're somewhere in between, that's what we need to do. What's God asked of us? Well, God has asked us personally to weigh the gospel. Have we obeyed it? Have we considered what he has done? Have we responded to that? If we have, then what has God asked us to do? To live faithful. You know, I've always had a little bit of a reaction to that, because we have these 5 steps and then we say, and then live faithful. It's like the 5 steps were the big part, and then the big part is living faithfully. Look at Peter's life. It's not easy, is it? There are going to be moments where we're falling apart and God has to reach down and get us. There are going to be moments where we might be completely destroyed, as Jesus looked at Peter. There are moments, too, that we also need to be reassured and encouraged. The shoreline with Peter. But what does Peter go on to do? The impact he has. Why? Because he didn't sit on the sidelines and say, oh, it's me. How terrible I've been. You know, I'm not making light of it. I'm not trying to make light of his sins. He wouldn't make light of his sins. We could do this with Saul. I'm saying Saul now instead of Paul on purpose. But the point is, they get up and they do. So we're going to extend an invitation. If you've not obeyed the gospel, of course, we want to encourage you to give great consideration of doing that tonight. But if you have, and we're here together tonight thinking about the lesson of Peter, we ask ourselves, what's something we've been waiting? We haven't done it because we're just kind of waiting for the better time to do it. You know when that arrives, right? Never. Just like, oh, I'm waiting for things to slow down. Have you ever said that? Yeah, I've been waiting for now 23 years for things to slow down. So I think that's when, we had our first kid and just waiting for things to slow down. They don't slow down. You think they're going to and something else takes its place. It doesn't work that way. You know when the best time to do the right thing is? Well, 10 years ago,
Yeah.
right? You know when the second best time to do it is? No. I'm using the old tree thing. When's the best? Yeah. They say what the best time to plant a tree is like 20 years ago, and the second time, the best time is now. But it's just true. There's something small, maybe something big, and here's the invitation tonight if you are willing to hear it. Identify what that is. Put your hands to it this week. Be like Peter, following his example. If you fail, God's going to help pick you up, but put your hands to it. Tonight, if you're in need of prayers, if you're in need of obeying the gospel, if we can help in some other way, would you make it known as we stand together and sing the song of invitation?